Number 1.
Recently I was shopping in a very popular department store when I had to use the bathroom. The women's bathroom is all the way in the back of the store, right near an emergency exit and pretty secluded. I walk in the 2-stall bathroom and one is taken, so without thinking anything of it I just go into the only other stall available. As soon as I lock the door, the person in the other stall, without flushing, and hasn't made any noise since I went into the bathroom, unlocks their door and walks over to the sink. I'm still not really thinking much of it. I'm kind of pee-shy, so I just sit there for a few seconds hoping they'll leave. Instead, they do nothing. Now I'm kind of confused, piecing together that they're not washing their hands and they never flush the toilet. I slowly tilt my head down to look under the stall and notice that whoever this is clearly wearing large men boots and ratty jeans. Now I'm full on scared. I'm naturally a worrier and I know we're in a secluded area. I try to calm myself down and count to 15 to give them a chance to prove me wrong and wash their hands or something. As I'm counting I realize that even if this was a woman and she was fixing her hair or makeup, I would surely hear some sort of shuffling, but it was complete silence. I get to 15, and still no movement. Now I'm full on shaking, as I realize how alone we are and that I'm cornered into a bathroom with what I'm picturing as a large man based on the legs I'm seeing. I reach into my purse to fake a phone call, but I was so nervous that I didn't even try to make my phone ring by playing a ringtone first. I just put it to my ear and said, "Hello?" I was too nervous to even keep talking because I didn't know what the man would do. Luckily, he immediately left and I followed his feet under the stall to make sure he was gone. Even creepier, I watched him walk to the right. As I exited the bathroom as fast as I could, I noticed that to the right was an emergency exit door propped open. Who knows what this guy wanted to do or where he wanted to bring me. There could have been a car right out back waiting for us. I still can't imagine the face I would have seen looking back at me if I just finished my business and left the stall. I told the store manager and they kind of feigned concern, but I could tell they either didn't care or didn't believe me. I even called their headquarters the next day to report it again.
Number 2.
I didn't realize how messed up this was at the time, but looking back I feel kind of lucky. I haven't really had many encounters like this in my life. I'm a chubby male, so creepers tend to leave me alone. When I was 19 I lived in Kentucky, pretty far from my northern Michigan hometown. It was this little town called Pikeville, where there was very little crime. I actually kind of miss it and want to go back, but I digress. My family came down to visit me for my birthday that year and we agreed to meet up at the Hardys in town the morning after they got into town. I got there a lot earlier than them, me being the type to show up 15 minutes early and them being the types who show up way late. As I was standing outside waiting, this guy walks up to me. If you've ever lived in a place like this, you know everyone is super friendly, so it didn't strike me as odd when he started talking to me. During our conversation, all kinds of alarm bells should have been going off. Like, after he found out I went to the college, he said he saw me at a party. This is impossible as I never once went to a party. When he found out I'm a gamer nerd, he started talking about playing D&D all the time. He kept taking sips out of some sort of alcohol bottle, mind you, it's like 10 AM at this point, and kept offering me some. There were a few other things like this. He started talking about how he lost all his friends because he got into drugs and I felt a little bad for him. He asked if I wanted to walk around for a bit, and since I knew my family wouldn't be there for a while I went. The guy had been talking about how he lost all his friends due to drugs and I felt bad for the guy. That coupled with the fact that I hadn't had any encounters like this and the lack of crime kind of disarmed the warning part of my brain. We walked and talked for a little while, maybe 10 minutes, before I realized we were in a shady looking part of town. I had never even realized there were shady parts of this small town, but here we were. We stopped in front of a house that looked long abandoned with this dark, narrow, sketchy alley next to it. He starts talking about how he knows 2 girls that live here and how they like to party and whatnot. He tells me about how DTF they are and asks if I want to meet them. It was at this point that my common sense finally kicks in. I'm in a shitty part of town, with a sketchy guy the first don't know who was just talking about doing hard drugs, and no one knows I'm here. And now he wants me to go into an obviously abandoned house under the guise of meeting some ladies. I obviously declined his offer and immediately said I needed to get back as my family was probably waiting. He seemed a little upset about this and then asked if I could help him move a pool table into his van, which was conveniently parked down the alley. I declined this as well. This is when he began to reach into his jacket pocket. Since those bells started going off, I realized just how much this guy looked like he might stab me, and this terrified me. At this moment, my stepmom did the only kind thing she ever did for me. She called to see where I was. I took this as an opportunity to hastily exit. The creep followed me for 3 blocks. I don't know what exactly this guy wanted, but it was probably just to rob me. Still, that area has a good amount of disappearances and is one of the worst areas in the country for human trafficking. I don't know what would have happened had I agreed to help. It reminded me of that one scene from Silence of the Lambs where Bill lures a victim into his van. I hope he got the help he needed and is doing better, but I also hope just as much that I never have the misfortune of running into him again.
Number 3.
I'm a 20-year-old female. About 5 feet 6 inches and a bit on the heavier side. I have been catcalled and creeped on more times than I can remember, but this one really stuck with me. When I was 16, I went to a filmmaking class for teens, and to get there I took one bus and walked about 6 blocks on a major street. I went to this class about twice a week, so I knew the route well, and walking it was second nature to me. It was just a normal Wednesday walking the 6 blocks when I saw an old beat-up red truck pulling up alongside me. It had slowed down to a crawl, and that's when I really took notice of it. I looked up to see a man in his 40s staring at me, giving me a toothy grin. He waved and motioned for me to come closer. I tried to ignore him and kept walking. This shit happened to me all the time, and I didn't think much of it. I could hear him calling to me, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. It was another language, but not one I recognized. He continued to drive beside me for the rest of the block before he started speaking English. "Come here," he kept saying, getting louder each time. Eventually I looked up and yelled back, "No. Leave me alone." He ignored it and started telling me to get in his truck. At this point he has followed me for 2.5, almost 3 blocks. I start to get a pit in my stomach as I realize something was very wrong. He was yelling at me to get in his car with more and more anger in his voice as he continued to follow me for the 4th block. I only had about 2 blocks left between me and the building my class was in, so I started to run. He matched my speed and started screaming insults at me. Some were in English, some weren't. "Get in the effing car, you whore," he screamed, looking like he was about to pull over and get out. I ran as fast as I could and burst through the door of my class building in tears. My teacher immediately asked what was wrong, and I told him some guy was trying to take me outside. My teacher, being a very tall man, ran outside to find the guy. But there was no sign of the guy or his truck anywhere. I don't know what would have happened to me if my class had been even 1 more block away. I might not have made it. I stopped going to class after that. Mostly for unrelated reasons. Whoever you are, creepy truck guy, I hope I never see you again.
Number 4.
I was 22 at the time, working in a restaurant downtown. I closed and had to walk home any time between midnight and 4 a.m. It took me an hour to get home, down a main street half of the way, and then through a neighborhood to my apartment. One night after closing at 4 a.m., I walked halfway and decided to stop on a bench to read a book. I was scared of walking in the pure dark and would sometimes find a place to read until sunrise, typically a 24-hour diner, but this night I opted for a bench next to a 24-hour drugstore. Now this is a busy street during the day, but dead at night. Hardly any cars and usually no people. As I'm reading, I notice a man directly in front of me, crossing the street toward me. He's under a streetlight, face illuminated, sweaty and twisted into an unnatural smile. Red flag. By the way, I'm a dude. 6'2", and quite thin and beautiful, if I do say so myself. I start putting my book in my bag and stand up, poised to GTFO. He greets me, shakes my hand and introduces himself. Says he just attended an after-party for the premiere of a play he directed at a theater down the street. He asks me where I'm going and I say I am going to meet my girlfriend for breakfast, which was a lie. He replies, "No you're not." I say, "Oh? Where am I going then?" Without a pause, he responded, "To my house." I forget exactly what I said back, but basically I noped out of there and walked away. Now, he was standing between me and my way home, so to escape I decided to walk down the main road rather than risk him following me into a dark neighborhood. After a moment I look back and he's gone. I walk back that direction so I can go home. He surprises me by angrily yelling, "Hey," seemingly from behind a dumpster. Still walking, looking the direction where his voice came from, but I can't see him. I ask, "What?" He creepily replies, "Come, air," and in nervous laughter, I reply, "No man, I've got places to be." I proceed to walk fast the entire way home, paranoid AF that he's following me. I was freaked out for days. I went to the theater the next day and asked to speak with the director of the new play. This guy says, "Yes, I am the director," and looks so confused when I tell him about his creepy imposter. Later I filed a police report. The guy who wrote the report was really supportive and agreed it was weird. Needless to say, I never read on the street past midnight again.
Number 5.
I grew up in a pretty quiet, although poor, neighborhood. It was a lot of trailers with either kind elderly couples or the most trailer trash people you've ever seen. There was the occasional house break-in or drunken street argument, but overall it was fairly relaxed and we felt safe. I was about 10 years old, walking home from my bus stop. I was with my best friend Teresa, who was 11. We always walked home together since we lived on the same road and were the only two kids on that street, and the stop was a little less than a quarter mile from our houses, hidden around a bend in the road. My house was closer, so I would usually leave Teresa to walk the rest of the way to her house alone. It was only one house down from mine, so it wasn't a big deal. This day, we were only 2 houses down from mine, when we heard a car coming up the road behind us way too fast. We quickly moved into the grass, as our road had no sidewalks, to avoid the reckless driver. However, as soon as the car got up to where we were, it stopped. I looked over to see a large white windowless van, and a large white man in the driver's seat. He was now just idling forward, as slowly as he could, staring at us with a hungry expression. He was grinning, licked his lips a few times, and kept nodding to himself. Just imagine a fat redneck trucker-looking guy, nodding while gruntingly moaning and slurping his lips, and you have a mental image of the guy. We kept walking, but I kept watching him, thinking it was weird, but whatever. As soon as his van had moved past where he could stare at us, he slammed the gas and tore off to the end of the street. Just as Teresa and I started talking about how weird that was, we saw him stop at the end of our small street, turn around, and come speeding back towards us. We kept walking since we were almost to my house, but we were nervous. He again stopped when he got to us, and slowly crawled by, looking at us the way a dog looks at steak. We were really afraid at this point and we walked faster, hoping this guy wasn't about to jump out and grab us. We made it to the edge of my yard, but I gave my friend a look to tell her to keep walking. I didn't want him to see what yard we went to. As soon as he was past us, he sped off around the bend where we had come from. When we saw the van disappear around the corner, we took off running back to my house. We got inside before the van returned, and I ran to tell my mom what happened. Teresa was crying and she called her mom to let her know the situation. We ended up seeing the van speed up and down our street 3 more times looking for us, before finally giving up. We waited a good hour or so before my mom drove Teresa home. I never saw that guy or the van again, but I shudder to think that he may have been contemplating kidnapping us. So creepy redneck guy in the windowless van, let's not meet.